All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're tackling a big one, Medicare Advantage. It's a system that impacts millions of us, and it's right at the heart of this massive debate over the future of American healthcare. So let's break it down.
To really get a grip on this, we have to start with a story. A really powerful one that kicks off the whole investigation. The narrator says this: "My mom's Aetna Medicare Advantage plan wouldn't cover her stay anymore." Just think about that for a second. Imagine getting that news when your mom is battling late-stage cancer.
So yeah, that's not just some random, sad story. It's actually the jumping-off point for a huge investigation into what the source calls a fundamentally broken piece of the U.S. healthcare system.
And look at the choice they were facing. It was just impossible. Option 1, bring their mom home, a woman so sick she could barely walk, hooked up to IV drips. Option 2, switch off of her private Advantage plan, the one that's supposed to be better, right? And go back to the basic public Medicare plan that actually would have paid for her care. I mean, the irony there is just, wow. It's pretty jarring.
Okay, so all of this brings up a really basic question, but it's the key to the whole thing. What even is Medicare Advantage? Let's take a look at the two systems we're talking about here.
So, on one hand, you've got traditional Medicare. This is probably what you think of when you hear Medicare, Parts A and B. It's the public, government-run program that we all pay into through our taxes. Simple enough, right? The government runs it.
But then you've got the other option, Medicare Advantage. This is also called Part C. And here's the twist. It's a privately run alternative. The government literally pays private for-profit insurance companies to manage your healthcare. So that's the fundamental split, public versus private.
And this is where, according to the source, you see a huge difference. Just look at the administrative costs. For traditional government-run Medicare, the overhead is tiny, just 1.4%. But for the private Medicare Advantage plans, it's about 15%. That's more than 10 times higher. A huge chunk of the money isn't going to care.
So you might be wondering, how do so many people get signed up for these private plans? Well, the source points to some really aggressive marketing tactics, and they argue it can be pretty misleading. We're talking about everything from big celebrity endorsements to using official-looking Medicare logos. They promise lower costs, they'll give you gift cards to sign up. They even set up these little quizzes in pharmacies that, surprise, surprise, often steer you right toward their own plans.
Right, so a system like this doesn't just pop up out of nowhere. So how did we get here? Well, the investigation digs into the history, and it turns out this push for privatization goes back a long, long way.
The timeline is pretty fascinating. It starts way back in 1961 with something called Operation Coffee Cup, basically a campaign by the American Medical Association to fight against government-funded healthcare. Fast forward to 1982, and you have President Reagan signing a law that lets Medicare start working with private insurers. And that opened the door for what would eventually become Medicare Advantage in 1996.
And to give you a feel for the mood back then, check out this quote from that Operation Coffee Cup record. It's Ronald Reagan, and he's warning that if government healthcare passes, it will lead to socialism and invade every area of freedom. I mean, the language is incredibly strong, and it really framed the whole ideological battle.
Okay, so that's the backstory. Now let's get to the real meat of the investigation. This is where they start comparing the big promises of Medicare Advantage with what they say is the actual reality on the ground.
First up, let's talk about the #1 argument you always hear for privatization. It saves money, right? It's more efficient. So the big question is, does Medicare Advantage actually save taxpayers money?
Well, according to a study they cite, the answer is a hard no. Not only does it not save money, they claim it's the opposite. The estimate is that overpayments and what the source calls corrupt overcharges to these private plans are set to cost taxpayers, get this, nearly $1 trillion. A trillion with a T.
All right, so if it's not saving us a bunch of money, then the care has to be better, right? That's the other big promise. Better care, more choice for patients. Let's see what they found.
And once again, the investigation claims it's just not true. Their researchers found that people on these plans actually face higher rates of being denied care. The coverage rules are often more restrictive than old-school Medicare, and the networks of doctors you can see, way smaller. In fact, one study found that almost 15% of all care denials were specifically because of these stricter private plan policies. So all of this, the costs, the denials, It all builds up to what the source calls the trillion-dollar question, and it really gets to the heart of the matter, this fundamental conflict between making a profit and actually taking care of patients.
And you can really see this conflict when you just follow the money. With traditional Medicare, for every dollar spent, only about 1.4 cents goes to administrative costs. But with Medicare Advantage, that number balloons to around 15 cents. And that 15 cents has to cover all their overhead, all that marketing we talked about, and of course, their profits.
So here's the core argument the source is making. It's really simple. The purpose of a private insurance company is to make money off of you. The purpose of a government program is to serve you. And they argue that those two goals are just fundamentally different. A lot of the time, they're in direct conflict.
And just to offer some perspective, the source brings up another example, the VA health system for our veterans. That's a completely government-run program. And they point out that it actually has really high customer satisfaction rates. They use this to make the case that, hey, a government-run system can work and work well, right here in the US.
And that brings us to the final, really provocative question that the investigation leaves us with. It's this. If the whole point is to save taxpayer money and get people the care they need, wouldn't the simplest way to do that be to just cut out the corporate profiteers? The source basically frames them as middlemen who are just taking our money and putting it in their pockets. It's a powerful question, and definitely one to think about.